I was a combat veteran, then I got challenged by bikers at a gas station. It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon. I had just filled up my old Dodge Ram at a rundown gas station off Highway 47. The summer sun baked the pavement until it shimmered like a mirage. I was tightening the gas cap when I heard the low rumble of motorcycles pulling in behind me. 5 bikers, big guys in worn leather vests, their arms inked with skulls and flames, rolled up and circled the pumps like sharks. Their jackets said Devil's Sons. I'd heard of them before. Trouble on Two Wheels. One of them, a burly guy with a braided beard and mirrored sunglasses, pointed at me and laughed. "Hey, Grandpa," he yelled. "That your war wagon? Looks like it belongs in a scrapyard." The others chuckled, revving their engines to drown out the country music crackling from the station speaker. I ignored them. I'd learned in the Army, and later in the sandbox overseas, that the loudest guy in the room is usually the weakest. But they weren't done. As I started to climb back into my truck, another one, a younger punk with a red mohawk, blocked my door. "We got a rule, old man," he sneered. "You pump your gas, you pay a toll to the Sons. How much you got in that wallet?" I felt my blood pressure rise, but I kept my voice calm. "You picked the wrong guy today, son." He smirked and leaned in. "Bad move." I caught the smell of whiskey and stale cigarettes on his breath. "Oh yeah? What you gonna do, Grandpa? Call 911. I smiled, a tight, practiced smile, and took a step back. Slowly, deliberately, I took off my ball cap. The patch sewn onto it caught the light. Army Rangers. I watched their faces change. Some scoffed. Some hesitated. "You want to find out what happens when you challenge a combat vet?" I said. The leader barked a fake laugh. "Man, you ain't in Afghanistan now. This is our turf." I nodded. "You're right. And that's why I'll handle this nice and clean." I moved fast, too fast for men who lived off intimidation instead of real training. First, I drove the heel of my boot into the red Mohawk's knee, crack, dropping him like a sack of potatoes. Before the others could react, I pivoted and snatched a fuel hose off its hook, swinging it like a whip. The nozzle clipped another biker across the temple, sending him sprawling against a pump. The leader rushed me, pulling a chain from around his waist. I sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and twisted, a move drilled into me during a dozen close-quarters battle drills. The chain clattered uselessly to the ground. In 30 seconds, 3 of them were groaning on the asphalt. The other 2 backed away, engines sputtering as they tried to decide if it was worth it. It wasn't. "You think you're tough?" the leader spat, nursing his arm. "No," I said, grabbing my wallet and tossing a $10 bill at his feet. "That's for the cleaning bill. Might want to use it to fix that attitude, too." I climbed back into my truck and fired it up. In the rearview mirror, I watched them stumble and swear, not brave enough to follow. Lesson learned. Never assume a quiet man is a weak man. Some battles are won long before they even begin. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. About an hour later, after driving a few miles down the highway, I pulled into Big Pete's Diner, a little joint I knew well, the kind of place where they still poured coffee into chipped mugs and called you Han without thinking twice. I had just sat down at the counter and ordered a burger when I heard it again. The rumble of motorcycles. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up before I even turned around. The same 5 bikers, bruised, limping, and angry, were pulling into the parking lot. Reinforcements, too. Now it wasn't just 5, there were at least 10 of them. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Carol, noticed my expression and leaned in. "You know those guys?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," I said, standing up slowly. "They're not here for pie." I glanced around. The diner was nearly empty. A teenage couple in a booth. An old man reading a newspaper. None of them needed to get caught in the middle of this. I tossed some cash on the counter for my uneaten food and turned toward the door just as the bikers barged in. Well, the leader said, grinning wide despite the swelling on his jaw. "Looks like you forgot your manners earlier." His buddies fanned out, blocking exits. I spotted a big guy near the kitchen with brass knuckles on. Another had a tire iron tucked into his belt. "You really want to do this?" I asked. The leader shrugged. "We're just going to teach you some respect, old man. Shouldn't take more than a minute." I took a deep breath, cracked my knuckles. "All right," I said. "Your funeral." The first one lunged at me, big, fast, and stupid. I grabbed a glass sugar jar from the counter and smashed it into his forehead. He dropped like a sack of wet cement. Chaos exploded around me. Another biker swung a chair. I ducked, driving my shoulder into his gut, and flipping him over onto a table, which collapsed under the weight. Brass knuckles charged. Bad move. I sidestepped, caught his swinging arm, and twisted it up behind his back until he screamed like a wounded coyote. Then I booted him through the swinging kitchen door. The fight was dirty, fast, and brutal. Exactly the kind of close-quarters mess I'd trained for overseas. Two of them tried to dogpile me together. I grabbed a pot of hot coffee off the counter, splash, right into their faces. While they howled, I grabbed a broom and used it like a quarterstaff, cracking knees and ribs as they staggered. Finally, the leader pulled out a knife. A cheap switchblade, but deadly enough if you got sloppy. He lunged. I sidestepped again, grabbed his wrist, and twisted until he dropped the blade. One hard knee to his gut, and he hit the floor, gasping. Silence fell over the diner. The bikers that could still move were dragging their wounded out the door. Some limped to their bikes, others just ran. I wiped a cut on my cheek with a napkin and turned to Carol, who was peeking out from behind the counter. "You got a broom back there?" I asked. "Might as well help you clean up." She blinked, then started laughing, a real, belly-deep laugh. "Coffee's on the house, soldier," she said. "You just paid for it in full." Lesson number 2. When a combat veteran says, "You really don't want to do this," listen to him. I figured that had to be the end of it. I paid for my coffee, tossed Carol an extra 20 for the mess, and hit the road again, thinking I'd seen the last of the Devil's Sons. Wrong again. About 15 minutes down the highway, flashing lights filled my mirrors, red and blue. Sheriff's cruiser. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, engine idling. A heavy-set sheriff climbed out. His uniform was clean, too clean for a man working a backwater county. His mirrored shades reflected my truck like twin bullets. He sauntered up, hand resting on his holstered sidearm. "You mind stepping out of the vehicle, son?" he said, way too casually. I stepped out, hands visible. I knew the drill. "You got a name?" he asked. "Jack. Jack Turner." He scratched his chin, clearly pretending to check something on a notepad. "You match the description of a man who assaulted some upstanding citizens at a diner back up the road." I raised an eyebrow. "Upstanding?" I asked. "They trashed the place." He smirked. "Funny. See, I know the Sons real well. Good men. Veterans themselves." I knew what this was. Small-town sheriff, probably deep in the Sons' pocket. Maybe he owed them favors. Maybe they paid him off. Didn't matter. "You coming peacefully, Jack?" he said. "Or am I going to have to get rough?" I smiled. Not out of joy. Out of a deep, slow-burning fury that settled into my bones. "Before you make that decision," I said quietly, "you might want to call this number." I pulled a card from my wallet, a simple black card with a silver eagle stamped on it. Department of Defense, Emergency Contact Line. The sheriff squinted at it. His smug grin faltered. "You see," I continued, voice low and even, "I didn't just serve. I was part of a unit that doesn't officially exist. People like me, we don't call 911. We call people who call the Pentagon." I watched the sweat bead on his forehead. "I'll wait," I said, crossing my arms. He hesitated. His fingers twitched toward his radio. He muttered something low into the mic. Less than a minute later, the radio squawked back, sharp, urgent, almost panicked. "Unit 7, disengage. Immediately. Do not detain. Repeat, do not detain subject. Stand down and return to station." The sheriff swallowed hard. He gave me a stiff nod, like a man who just realized he was standing on a landmine. "You're free to go, sir," he said, voice tight. I climbed back into my truck, rolled down the window, and gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Tell the Sons," I said, "next time they want to play tough guy, they better bring more than loud engines and cheap tricks." I pulled away slow, tires spitting gravel. In the rear view, I watched the sheriff stand there, hands on his hips, looking smaller than he had when he first walked up. Lesson number 3. Never pick a fight with someone who's been fighting real wars longer than you've been alive. And never, ever underestimate the quiet ones. After the sheriff incident, I figured the Sons would finally get the message. But guys like them, pride bruised, egos shattered, they don't let things go. Not quietly, anyway. 2 days later, I rolled into the outskirts of an old junkyard I used to visit for spare parts. That's when I spotted them. Bikes hidden behind rusted-out cars, men crouched in shadows, watching me. Only it wasn't just the Devil's Sons anymore. They had called backup, a nasty out-of-town gang known as the Grave Reapers. These guys weren't posers. They were ex-cons, ex-cartel muscle, The kind of men who smiled when the knives came out. There must have been 20 of them. Leather vests, chains, bats, knives, even a few sawed-off shotguns tucked under jackets. I pulled my truck up slow, acting casual. But in my gut, the instincts kicked in: threat assessment, exit strategy, environmental weapons. Combat mode. The leader, a massive reaper with a spiderweb tattoo over his bald scalp, stepped forward. "You must be Jack," he growled, voice like gravel. "Heard you made our brothers look bad. We're here to fix that." I sighed and climbed out of the cab, hands raised slightly. 20 guys, I said, looking around. "Seems fair." He grinned wide, showing gold teeth. "You think you're walking out of here?" I smiled back, a slow, dangerous smile. "No," I said. "I think you're not." Because what they didn't know? I had called in a favor. An old army buddy, code name Boomer, owed me his life from back in Kandahar. And Boomer? He loved fireworks. Hidden across the junkyard, tucked into car trunks and old oil drums, were remote explosives he had planted the night before after I caught wind the Suns were rallying back up. Nothing deadly. I wasn't out to kill anybody. Just enough shock and awe to send a crystal-clear message. As the Reapers and Suns closed in, I tapped a button on a small black remote clipped to my belt. Boom. A massive explosion rocked the far end of the yard, sending old car parts flying into the sky. KTHOM. Another blast flipped a stack of rusted refrigerators, scattering them like toy blocks. The bikers panicked, diving for cover. Bikes toppled over, men shouting and scrambling like ants. Through the smoke and chaos, I moved, fast and surgical. Disarmed the nearest guy with a snap kick. Smashed another over the head with a rusty tire iron. Swept a third guy's legs and left him wheezing in the dirt. The Reaper leader tried to rally, roaring orders, but another blast sent a wall of tires crashing down right behind him, cutting off half his men. One by one, they broke. Fear had replaced their cocky bravado, and fear spreads faster than fire. Within minutes, they were fleeing, dragging injured buddies, abandoning bikes, howling oaths they'd never keep. I stood there, breathing steady, as the last of them disappeared into the rising dust cloud. Later that night, Boomer and I sat by a campfire a few miles out of town, nursing beers. "You always did know how to make an exit," Boomer chuckled. I shrugged. "Sometimes people only understand one language." He raised his bottle. "To Jack Turner, the meanest old dog in the county." We clinked bottles. The stars stretched overhead, clear and endless. I knew the Suns wouldn't be back. And if they were smart, they'd spread the word far and wide. You don't pick fights with a man who's fought real wars. You don't start a battle you have no idea how to finish. Final lesson: never corner a man who spent his life learning how to break through walls.